This is part 2 for the read-along for Unit 3.03, Realism and Naturalism 2. Be sure to click through this comparison whenever you go through the content on your own. And now we start with Henry Asawa Tanner. Born in Pittsburgh in 1859 to an African Methodist Episcopal minister father and a mother who escaped from slavery through the Underground Railroad, Henry Asawa Tanner is considered the most accomplished African American painter of his time. Tanner's interest in painting emerged in his teenage years. In 1879, he enrolled at Philadelphia's prestigious Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts. Under the tutelage of Thomas Eakins, Tanner's talents blossomed and he gained a solid foundation in human anatomy. Tanner's early work combined Eakins' naturalist and realist tendencies, a rigorous study of nature and the human form with a desire to portray the lives of ordinary people. Tanner produced very few genre paintings before turning to biblical themes, which he believed showed a strong connection to the contemporary experiences of African Americans. As a black artist in post-Civil War America, Tanner had difficulty gaining recognition and finding a market for his paintings. In 1891, he moved to Paris, where his talent was greatly admired in French art circles. Tanner made his home there until his death in 1937. So, we've got this man, Henry Asawa Tanner, born only 6 years before the end of the Civil War. Became interested in painting when he was a teenager and went to art school in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania at the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts. Under the tutelage, meaning that he studied under Thomas Eakins, his talents blossomed and he gained a solid foundation in human anatomy, meaning he studied and had a really good understanding of the human body and its proportions and how to draw and paint it. His early work combined Eakins' naturalist and realist tendencies, a rigorous study of nature and the human form, with a desire to portray the lives of ordinary people. So he's really, really good at drawing and painting people, has a really good grip on anatomy, and he has a strong desire to show the lives of everyday people. So he made a few genre paintings, then turned to biblical themes, so themes pulled from the Bible, because he believed that those biblical themes had a strong connection to the experiences of African Americans. But he had a hard time finding success as a black artist in America, and so he moved to Paris in 1891, where he gained a lot of recognition and stayed there until he died in the 30s. Tanner's The Thankful Poor. The Thankful Poor is representative of Tanner's early genre paintings in which he depicted ordinary scenes of contemporary African American life. In this painting, he presents a young boy sitting down for a meal with an elderly man. Tanner captures a quiet moment as the modest pair bows their heads in prayer. The figure's modest clothes and sparse table suggest a humble existence. So, this is representative of his early paintings, meaning that this is a good example of his early paintings. He wanted to do scenes of everyday African American life, so his subjects were African American. He shows a young boy and an elderly man sitting down at a table to eat. Captures a quiet moment as the modest pair bows their heads in prayer. The figure's modest clothes and sparse table suggest a humble existence. So they use the word modest twice here, meaning not fancy, right? It's plain. Because this family, it's suggested that this family doesn't have much. There's sparse table, meaning that there's not a lot of stuff on the table. It's not overflowing with all different kinds of food and fancy china and flower arrangements like it would be if it was a painting of a really wealthy person's table. Suggests a humble existence. So again, not a fancy existence, not an extravagant or rich existence. Tanner's masterful manipulation of light. Tanner used light and shadows to create a pious mood and also employed dark and light values to create a convincing sense of space. So, pious here refers to religious, and he also employed dark and light values to create a convincing sense of space. So there's deep shadows down, say, underneath the table and the chairs, and a fairly good shadow on this wall back here that make this painting, it gives it a good sense of depth, like it's going back into space. Light dances across the pottery on the table and disappears within the deep folds of the tablecloth. So I've got bright light on the dishes on top of the table and these really deep shadows in the folds of the tablecloth. Tanner also employed dark and light values to create a convincing sense of space. The bright sunlight reflects off the back wall and creates a striking contrast against the boy's thick umber hair and the man's dark silhouette. So I've got bright light against the back wall and then darker tones in the boy's hair and the man's silhouette, meaning his outline of his shape. Be sure and click through this whenever you're going through the content on your own. It gives you some nice close-up images of this painting. The struggle for dignity. Mass media of the 19th century typically portrayed African Americans as caricatures, stereotypes, or worse. Henry Asawa Tanner sought with his painting to present a more realistic viewpoint, as can be seen in The Banjo Lesson. Many of the artists who have represented Negro life have seen only the comic, the ludicrous side of it, he wrote, and have lacked sympathy with and appreciation for the warm, big heart that dwells within such a rough exterior. So, mass media, meaning newspapers, magazines of the 19th century, which is the 1800s, typically portrayed African Americans as caricatures, stereotypes, or worse. So caricatures meaning sort of cartoonish. In stereotypes, I think we all have an idea of what a stereotype is, where we say that all people of this race are like this, or all people from this part of the world are a certain way, right? And so mass media would show African Americans as these cartoony characters or these stereotypes or even worse. And so Tanner wanted to make these paintings with a more realistic viewpoint and show that these are real people, right? And he wanted people to have sympathy with and appreciation for the warm, big heart that dwells within such a rough exterior. So he was trying to show that even if a person looks rough on the outside, they can still have this warm, big heart on the inside, and that we shouldn't just reduce people to these characters and stereotypes, as he put it, the comic and ludicrous side. So be sure and click through the content or click through the images of this painting whenever you go through this on your own. And that is it for the read-through of 3.03 Realism and Naturalism 2.